At least 34 people have been arrested in Springs, Gauteng for allegedly using around 100 Sassa cards to withdraw cash at an ATM. They had apparently planned to withdraw money from 100 cards, which would have totaled around 100,000 rand. The suspects failed to explain how they got the cards and who owns them. Let's get more from Sassa spokesperson Paseka Letsatsi. Thank you very much, Mr. Letsatsi, for your time. So what do we know at this stage about the criminals who were found using these cards?
Good evening, Anlie, and thanks for having me. Look, these people have the cards which belong to Sassa, and they went around withdrawing money at the ATMs. And I think they broke the law in terms of the Sassa Act, because that card which is given to an individual belongs to the individual, and it's not supposed to be given to anybody. So in that instance, they were found. I just wanted to correct the numbers. They were found with about 300 cards, and these individuals were basically 31, and they were found with about 100,000 with them.
Sure. And the owners of the cards, do you know yet who they belong to?
We are still making those particular investigations. Remember, the cards were basically taken by the South African police services, but obviously we'll then be able to know once the investigations go on, because obviously what is happening is that they might think, these people, that this is just a joke, but it's a very serious matter which they've just engaged in. What they basically do, they take the cards of people, but they then engage in what we call the mashonisa, where they give people money without following proper processes and so on. And what happens then is that when the money gets paid to a beneficiary, they would go to the bank, withdraw money, and the card stays with them and give this individual whatever that is left. And obviously the Act, both the National Credit Act and the Sassa Act, does not allow a card of an individual to be given to somebody else. But we also want to talk to our beneficiaries that please make sure that you do not necessarily give anybody your cards or your ID, because if you do that, you'll be defrauded, and people will then leave us with no other means but to intervene. And when we intervene, it won't be nice, because in this instance, the South African police services had to come and arrest people.
So one can only imagine that it must be very easy to con an elderly person out of their Sassa cards with the promise of, well, you don't have to stand in the long queue, I'll do that for you and I'll bring the money. But in an instance, as you say, where the Act says that the owner of a card is not allowed to give that card to anybody else, these people have now been found in possession of cards that do not belong to them. How does the legality work in terms of who is responsible for this crime?
What we do, and firstly, we do beneficiary education just to educate the public, and in particular the beneficiaries, because there's, as much as you have rights as an individual, you must know that you also have the responsibility to make sure that you do things by the book. But obviously, as a beneficiary as well, as much as you have the rights, you also have the responsibility to make sure that, one, you do not necessarily give your PIN to anybody else. Two, you don't give your card to anyone else, but that card belongs to you. Unless if the conditions are such that you won't be able to withdraw the money, there's a process that must be followed. You need to make sure that you appoint a procurator who then get the money on your behalf. But in this instance, we have taken a decision as an organization that we need to make sure that we upscale the beneficiary education. That's the first thing which we want to do, so that people know that what they are doing is illegal and it's wrong. But secondly, when we interacted with some of these individuals yesterday, they just looked, they were numb. You could see that they don't see anything wrong which they have done. So we don't necessarily want to push the blame towards the beneficiary, but we also want to make sure that the beneficiaries take responsibility. But these individuals, I think the police, the matter is within the hands of the police, and we hope that the police will get to the bottom of the matter and make sure that those who are found to have violated the law are charged, which they were charged today. They go through the proper processes, and people must face the music.
Sorry, the line was breaking up slightly there. Did you say that they were charged today? And if so, what were they charged with?
Today, Andy, they went to court at Springs, and they were given the bail ranging from 3,000 to 500, from 3,000 to 5,000. And I think the police are basically busy trying to make other investigations relating to this particular matter. But what we can tell you now that there are two laws which were basically broken. It's one, it's the National Credit Act, which stipulates very clearly what you need to do if you want to lend money. But secondly, we know that the Sassa Act actually has been broken in a sense that when we give an individual, in actual fact, and that card belongs to government. It belongs to Sassa, but it's given to an individual so that the individual is able to access their money. And if the individual decide to give that card to somebody else, or a card is taken to an individual with their help or without their help, it becomes a criminal offense. So they broke those particular two laws. We'll be watching the processes very closely. We'll be monitoring it, and we'll definitely have an interest in terms of how the processes will unfold.
Very interesting that you say that essentially, if these cards were stolen, then the individuals who stole them stole directly from government, as those cards, as you rightly point out, are government possession. So you also said that some of these people who were caught and arrested were laughing, that they did not realize the seriousness of this offense. Just to communicate the seriousness of what could be the consequences for, theft of or taking or using a Sassa card unlawfully, what punishment could come with that kind of offence?
Look, Anlie, I think let me not cross the red line, because it's within the authority of the courts to make a decision on this matter. But all that we can simply tell those individuals and the public out there that if you are engaged in this particular activity, because we know that it does not happen there in Springs only. There are people who are doing all these illegal activities all over the country. This is a very serious offense, and please refrain from taking people's cards without you being appointed a procurator. Because if you are appointed a procurator, therefore it becomes legal for you to have a card and go and withdraw the money. But if you do it without being given the authority, you are committing a very serious offense. So we are saying as an organization, please refrain from doing that. But Anlie, I don't want to get into the processes before the court. I think the presiding officer will then evaluate and make their own judgment and pass judgment in terms of whatever the processes.
Completely understandable, as long as those watching understand the seriousness of this offence. Thank you so much for your time and giving us some of those details. That was Sassa spokesperson Paseka Letsatsi.